So over the last kind of few years, my father has kind of constantly just been very good about, asking for forgiveness, when he's messed up or somehow, trespassed against me. And there's also been times where he's just kind of, asked for forgiveness for kind of certain child-rearing things he did, and he's, just felt a little more guilty about just more recently. And I just find this beautiful that, my father, and his love for me, is able to, in his weakness, when he's messed up, come to me and ask for forgiveness. And my father has helped teach me that a true Christian father is able to say, "I'm sorry," and ask for forgiveness. A year ago to the very day, I gave my first homily here at St. Patrick Parish as a newly minted father, and it was the Feast of Corpus Christi and also Father's Day too. And do you know what I said for my very first homily? I said, no matter how much I give of myself to you, no matter how much I give of myself to St. Patrick Parish, you will always be disappointed because the reality is I'm not perfect. I'm weak. I'm fallible. I'm going to say the wrong things, forget names, miss appointments. I'm going to fail you. These were the exact words I gave a year ago to the day. And those words have been realized, over this past year, believe it or not, and that I've given bad advice and talked when I should have listened. I couldn't tell you all the names of the seventh graders I taught, although I remember all the good and bad ones. Yeah, don't forget those names. I've missed appointments, and at times I have actually intentionally put some off, And I'm sorry, with all my heart. I'm not perfect, but I want to be a better spiritual father. Please forgive me. Recently, this is in the news, perhaps you've heard or you haven't heard, but the Dodgers publicly honored a group called the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, a blasphemous group that makes a mockery of all that we hold most sacred. And, I'm not going to get into all the details of the more heinous acts that they've publicly performed. There's YouTube if you want to satisfy your own curiosity. But I would feel remiss if I didn't denounce this group and the Dodgers' public support of them. If such a group can publicly be applauded, then I feel perfectly within my rights to publicly denounce the actions of such a group, because a line has been crossed. And we as Catholics cannot idly stand by when applause is given for the mockery of all that we hold sacred. We must stand up because of what we are all gathered here in the sacred space for at every Sunday, at every Mass, and more especially in this Mass particularly because we're here also for our children who are ready to receive their first communion, the most holy Eucharist, the body, blood, soul, and divinity of our loving Lord. And they're here to come into deeper communion with Christ and his church. This is something true. This is something good. This is something beautiful and not something to be made a mockery of or to be profaned. When our faith is undermined or insulted, sometimes there's this thought that for some reason, I can't speak out against it because, I'm a sinner. Who am I to judge? But the reality is, just because you have failed in sin does not mean you give others a free pass. As a father or parent, you know that you do not give your kids, a free pass on abusing drugs if perhaps in your past, you didn't use alcohol responsibility. You wouldn't do that. We're all sinners, but our weakness should not prevent us from standing up for what is true, what is good, and what is beautiful. A true Christian father does not let his shortcomings and weaknesses prevent him from standing up for the true, the good, and the beautiful. And so how do we stand up to evil? How are we to respond, to the Dodgers honoring, an anti-Catholic group? We look to Christ. We look to the cross. And we see that, we can have a righteous anger just as Jesus, drove out those money changers from that sacred space of the temple. We could denounce the actions of those who attempt to profane the sacred, the actions. And it is right that we should wholeheartedly denounce them. But as Christians, we also understand that we're called to even more than denouncement. We are called to love. It reads in today's second reading, "But God proves his love for us, in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. How much more then, since we are now justified by his blood, will we be saved through him from the wrath? Though Christ was sinless, he sacrificed himself on the cross to save you, each and every one of you. He wasn't making reparations for his own sins, but ours. This church is filled with imperfect fathers. I'm an imperfect spiritual father, but we have a heavenly Father who gave us the perfect man, Jesus. And this perfect man shows us what it is to truly love. He was perfect and did not need to make reparations for any sin of his own that he himself committed. And so, if we want to be better, if we want to be more perfect, we must imitate perfection. We must imitate Jesus. Jesus made reparation for the sins of others. And so we too must make reparation for the sins of others. We're all called to make reparations for those acts of blasphemy which are committed against our church, against our sacred beliefs. And so that is how we are to respond in protest and in prayer and love. A true Christian father is able to say, "I'm sorry," and ask for forgiveness. A true Christian father does not let his shortcomings and weakness prevent him from standing up for the true, the good, and the beautiful. And a true father makes reparation not only for his own sins, but for the sins of others.